She walked directly into the flames after spotting it coming. Cleopatra had everything needed to ruin a career. A script in flux, a shoot so expansive it could swallow fortunes, a studio already in trouble, and a romance that would make half the globe cringe. Even so, Elizabeth Taylor agreed. Why? Leverage is the first step. Fox offered a record-breaking offer, a portion of the income and a $1 million upfront payment. No actress had ever wielded such authority. Richard Burton followed, whose entrance transformed a big epic into a popular fad. She remained resolute despite a near-fatal sickness and an urgent throat operation. Taylor was aware of the danger, reputational damage, studio rage, and unstoppable headlines. But there was a strategy underneath the gems. She was playing for love, money, and the more elusive thing, permanence. The story lies in the actual computation. 21st Century Fox was in disarray by the late 1950s. Expensive musicals had ceased to draw large audiences, television was reducing box office earnings, and the studio was in dire need of a show that would redeem itself. The concept of Cleopatra, an epic so magnificent that it might overshadow all else in theaters, was chosen by executives. However, they required more than just sets and costumes to make it work. A face that could sell the myth was what they needed. That face was Elizabeth Taylor. She was more than simply a star at the moment. The star was her. Renowned throughout the world for her violet eyes, high-profile relationships, and capacity to draw attention wherever she went. She was already the most bankable celebrity in Hollywood, had survived several marriages, and had won an Academy Award for Butterfield 8. Fox was aware that including her name would ensure media attention and elevate the project's status. But Taylor wasn't very interested in performing an epic with swords and sandals. She believed that the genre was outdated, bloated, and beneath her. She threw out a number that she thought was ridiculous when Fox called. A portion of the profits in addition to $1 million. They answered yes, which surprised her. It was an incredible bargain. For the first time, an actor was promised $1 million compensation, which went above the base pay. In addition to daily allowances, a private villa during production, first-class airfare, and 10% of the gross profits. Taylor's contract provided her with advantages that would eventually propel her earnings into the millions. The figure was prominently displayed in newspaper headlines. She became a target and an untouchable celebrity overnight after being dubbed the $1 million star. She gained unheard-of leverage from that record-breaking paycheck. If she thought the production wasn't ready, she could insist on alterations to the setting, creative input, or even delays. Taylor knew just how to use her influence, which few women in Hollywood history had ever possessed. However, it also caused expectations to soar to unachievable levels. She would be held responsible for every dollar the studio spent and every setback the movie faced. As soon as she signed, Cleopatra became the Elizabeth Taylor film, its destiny inextricably linked to hers, and no longer merely another historical epic. Taylor was aware of the danger. She had to bear the entire burden of Fox's survival in addition to Cleopatra's crown when she accepted the role. She would be untouchable if the film became a hit. She would be the face of Hollywood excess if it fell, and she would quickly learn how burdensome that crown could be. Cleopatra was troubled almost immediately when the cameras started rolling. Taylor stepped onto enormous sets constructed at Pinewood Studios for the first filming, which started in London in 1960. However, before a single scene was completed, the production lost money due to the unfavorable English weather, which flooded the outside sites with fog and rain. Then the real crisis struck. Taylor passed out from a nearly fatal case of pneumonia while filming was in progress. She spent weeks in the hospital after undergoing an emergency tracheotomy, barely surviving. The slight scar on her throat served as a constant reminder for the rest of her life that Cleopatra had also nearly claimed her off-screen. The London production was shut down by Fox after Taylor became incapacitated. The costumes and sets were thrown away, has written off millions of dollars. It was among the most expensive false starts in the history of Hollywood. Before a single frame was taken, the studio had already spent an estimated $7 million. Critics ridiculed the waste, executives panicked, and rumors circulated that Cleopatra was cursed and would destroy everyone. The production was saved by a whole new director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who moved it to Rome when filming eventually restarted. Fox took a chance that the sunshine and ancient ruins of the Eternal City would lend the film a genuineness that London was unable to provide. However, the change just made things more expensive. The budget went into overdrive when the cast and crew had to be transported across continents. New palaces and temples had to be constructed on the Cinecittà backlit, and production had to start over. What had begun as a manageable epic was becoming a catastrophic failure. But Taylor came out of her near-death experience more motivated than before. No producer could ignore her now because of her kind of leverage. There wouldn't have been a film without her. She was aware of it. Fox was aware of it. The media was aware of it as well. Newspapers covered Elizabeth Taylor's survival, as well as Cleopatra's problematic production, making her a costly liability as well as a sad figure. Her name was now attached to every failure. The actual explosion was yet to come, but the movie was already getting out of hand. It came in the shape of a co-star who would turn a sloppy filming session into a global scandal. Cleopatra changed from a problematic production to a world-renowned spectacle when Richard Burton was chosen to play Mark Antony. Burton was already well known as a brilliant, extravagant, and charming Shakespearean actor. He was married, too. At the time, singer Eddie Fisher was also married to Elizabeth Taylor, whom, only a few years prior, she had already scandalized Hollywood by stealing from Debbie Reynolds. Burton and Taylor were known for their fervor and erratic behavior, and flames flew as soon as they hit each other on the Roman set. What started off as practices soon became so obvious that the team was unable to ignore it. Outside Cinecittà Studios, paparazzi skulked, documenting late-night meetings and clandestine kisses. Every picture was grabbed by tabloids, fueling stories that made the film sound like the scandal's background noise. Congressmen from the United States once openly condemned Taylor's actions. The Vatican even voiced their opinion, accusing her of erotic vagrancy in an editorial. Seldom has a movie star been so openly denounced, and the censure had never been so widely disseminated throughout the world. The controversy generated terrible publicity for Fox. The film was already heavily indebted, and now its star was at the center of what some referred to be the century's most infamous scandal. Audiences would boycott out of disgust, according to critics. Rather, the mayhem only served to increase Cleopatra's notoriety. People went to the movies more to see the chemistry that had ignited Rome and Hollywood than to learn about Egypt's history, and the affair became inextricably linked to the movie. However, Taylor saw the affair as both personal and professional. She was aware that the headlines were portraying her as a careless seductress, ruining her reputation as a serious actor. She wouldn't give up on Burton or the film, though. By that time, the two were openly and emotionally intertwined. It would have been an admission of defeat to leave. Staying would have required enduring censure in return for love, power, and the opportunity to outlive the scandal. And money was another thing that strengthened her commitment. In addition to being a romance and a risk to her reputation, Elizabeth Taylor saw Cleopatra as the most lucrative contract in Hollywood history. Despite the scandal, illness, and interminable delays that she endured, Elizabeth Taylor remained steadfast in her devotion to Cleopatra because of the money. Her contract was historic when she signed it in 1959. It guaranteed $1 million plus 10% of the gross income. For the first time, an actor had earned more than $1 million. And she became a representation of Hollywood excess just by virtue of the number. For comparison, the biggest stars of the time only received a small portion of that. Taylor's agreement was so significant that it garnered international attention, positioning her as both a target and a trailblazer. However, the fine print added even more value. Every time production paused due to delays, Taylor was paid daily allowances and penalty fines. More money poured into Fox's account the longer she fumbled. Her entire compensation had skyrocketed well above that first $1 million by the time the film eventually debuted in 1963. According to current estimates, she made about $7 million, which at the time was an incredible amount and is now more than $50 million. It was never truly an option to walk away. Even while the movie was a financial burden for Fox, it was a treasure trove for her. She gained professional advantage from the deal that no other actress had ever had. She was a stakeholder in the movie's success rather than merely a hired star. A power maneuver that changed the rules for how performers may be compensated. Later, Taylor said that she had joked that she had asked for the $1 million since she was certain the studio would never grant her request. When they did, she became aware that she had bargained her way into the most influential role of her professional life. That power has a cost, of course. Her unprecedented compensation was linked to every headline about the budget's soaring costs. She was demonized as avaricious and held responsible for Fox's bankruptcy, is portrayed as the embodiment of excess in Hollywood. Money protected her from the possibility of leaving, despite the fact that production instability and executive poor management were mostly to blame for the excessive spending. She was aware that she would leave Rome richer than any previous actress, even as critics sharpened their blades. Additionally, sticking has the advantage of influence. They grew increasingly frantic to keep Fox happy as her debt increased, allowing her to participate in choices about production and casting changes. In addition to being Cleopatra on screen, Taylor was also Cleopatra off-screen, exercising authority in ways that an actress could not have imagined a few years ago. Although money provided her with stability, it was unable to protect her from the story that was being told about her. Elizabeth Taylor was no longer seen by many as a serious actress who pursued big roles. She was frighteningly strong, opulent, and scandalous, just like Cleopatra herself. The record-breaking contract Elizabeth Taylor signed did more than just increase her wealth. It allowed her to have a say in the creation of Cleopatra. In the early 1960s, actresses rarely had that kind of authority, but Fox was powerless. They had put so much money into her that it became necessary to keep Taylor happy in order to complete the film. She could demand adjustments that most celebrities would never consider, insist on shooting locations, and push back on rewrites. She was more than just the lead on stage. She served as the focal point of the production, but fame came with authority. When Joseph L. Mankiewicz took over as director during the catastrophic London shoot, the project was already in a downward spiral. Rewrites were commonplace, and the script was unfinished, growing to hundreds of pages. Rather than soothing the storm, Taylor became the lightning rod because of her presence. She was the target of headlines whenever schedules fell apart or tempers erupted. The perception that Elizabeth Taylor was directly to blame for the mayhem was strengthened by every headline about soaring budgets and every rumor about lengthy reshoots. The calculation was cruel to Taylor. She finally got the largest platform in Hollywood history, something she had always desired. Rome's sets were breathtaking. Temples, palaces, legions of extras, and jewel and gold-laden clothing. She was the first actress to be filmed on this scale. But the scrutiny was heightened by all that grandeur. Cleopatra would be everlasting if she was successful. She would be known as the person who sank a studio if it failed. She could sense the strain on her reputation. She had been fighting for recognition as an actress for years, and her performances in A Place in the Sun and Butterfield 8 earned her plaudits and even an Academy Award. Cleopatra, however, threatened to reverse everything. The public started to regard Elizabeth Taylor rather than Elizabeth Taylor as a genuine artist. Diva on a gold throne, surrounded by diamonds and scandal. Nevertheless, she continued on. Even negative press kept her name in the news because underlying the rumors was a clever understanding. People promised to purchase tickets to see her on screen the more they became fixated on her personal life. By sacrificing artistic credibility in favor of mere spectacle, it was a risky venture. However, Taylor was aware that if Cleopatra just made it through the fire, her stature would allow her to outlive the criticism. Fox, however, was not as tough. The studio itself was collapsing beneath the weight of the film as Taylor exercised her power. At a rate never before witnessed in Hollywood, 20th Century Fox was losing money by the time Cleopatra hobbled into completion. The budget, which was first estimated to be roughly $2 million, has now grown to over $30 million. When interest and costs are taken into account, some estimates bring it closer to $44 million. That is much over $300 million in today's currency. An incredible amount for a single movie in the early 1960s. The repercussions within the studio were instantaneous. Careers ended, executives were let go, and fear swept over the Fox lot. The company's financial situation was so bad that it was likely to go bankrupt. Fox did something that would permanently alter Los Angeles in order to raise rapid money. Hundreds of acres of their back lot were sold. Because Cleopatra almost destroyed its parent studio, The area that had held expansive sets and open space was turned into what is today's Century City, a glittering business district. In a way, the terrain of Hollywood itself was changed indirectly by Elizabeth Taylor's epic. This collapse was a double-edged sword for Taylor. On the one hand, she had walked away with a wealth, fulfilling her commitment. However, her name would always be associated with the film that nearly caused one of the world's largest studios to go bankrupt. Fox's million-dollar salary was mentioned in every report about her desperation. Whether rightly or wrongly, she came to represent Hollywood opulence, a celebrity whose demands and scandals had driven a business to its breaking point. Ironically, she was mostly unrelated to the mayhem. Fox's indecisive leadership, poor planning, and frequent director and writer changes caused the budget to skyrocket. The people, however, did not perceive that. They witnessed the most costly actress in history in the center of it all, along with Cleopatra's golden barge, the never-ending delays, and the love affair that dominated the news. For them, Elizabeth Taylor was Cleopatra, demanding, brilliant, and dangerously costly, both on and off screen. And when the movie eventually came out in 1963, everyone was wondering if it would be worth the money. The anticipation for Cleopatra's 1963 release was so great that the film barely managed to live up to the hype. The press viewed the launch as a judgment on Elizabeth Taylor herself, rather than merely an entertainment event, following years of controversy, illness, and skyrocketing expenses. Could the most controversial celebrity in the world be saved by the priciest film ever made? The image was paradoxical in terms of finances. Cleopatra brought in tens of millions of dollars worldwide, making it the highest-grossing movie of 1963. Its splendor, 4-hour duration, breathtaking settings, and the forbidden relationship between Taylor and Richard Burton captivated audiences. However, even record-breaking box office profits were insufficient to cover the expenses because the budget had skyrocketed to exorbitant proportions. The term flop remained with the public, and Fox continued to announce disastrous losses. The figures were irrelevant. Everyone clung to Taylor's pay as a symbol after the studio almost fell apart. Crucially, the response was just as mixed. Some applauded Taylor's command of the screen and her regal presence, pointing out that no other actress could have so perfectly captured Cleopatra's combination of charm and authority. Some said she was miscast, too contemporary, too theatrical, or just overshadowed by the excess of the production. European critics were especially critical, portraying her as more of a celebrity than an artist. The way the incident damaged the movie's reputation, however, was what hurt the most. Taylor was regarded as a public sinner who had flaunted her affair with Burton on the international stage, rather than only on the basis of her performance. Headlines continued to reiterate the Vatican's criticism. For years, Cleopatra was written up by reviewers as bloated film and proof that Taylor had compromised his artistic integrity for passion and splendor. Nevertheless, Taylor remained more enduring than ever despite the criticism. She was one of the few actresses who managed to survive such negative publicity. She continued to dominate every discussion, and the Taylor-Burton relationship grew so popular that it overshadowed the film. Her status as the most well-known woman in the world was solidified, even if her reputation as a serious actor had been damaged. Elizabeth Taylor had not fallen apart, but the gamble had almost burned her. This brings us to the true reason she accepted the position in the first place: power, wealth, and a romantic relationship that forced her to put everything on the line. Why, then, would Elizabeth Taylor choose a position that she knew would lead to her demise? There are layers to the truth. The million-dollar contract seemed attractive at first glance. Such leverage had never been used by any star. Taylor was also aware that the precedent and the payout would guarantee her a spot in Hollywood history, regardless of the movie's performance. When the figures were that high, it was never feasible to walk away, but money was only one factor. Cleopatra was more than merely a film after Richard Burton joined the cast. It served as the testing ground for their romance. Taylor refused to leave him or the role that united them, enmeshed in the kind of passion that made tabloid headlines across the globe. For her, completing the movie was as much about supporting Burton as it was about keeping a promise. Although the affair damaged her reputation, it also gave her a sense of energy that she was unable to shed. Pride and a strong feeling of legacy were also present. Taylor had previously been undervalued and written off as a scandal magnet or just another glitzy face. She asserted that Cleopatra was the biggest canvas Hollywood had ever created for a woman. No one else could hold the throne that the sets, the costumes, and the armies of extras occupied. She was aware that her reputation would suffer, but she also realized that her status as a cultural influence would never be questioned again. She was Cleopatra not only on screen, but also in the way she demanded power, wealth, and attention. In a sense, she was correct. In the short term, the movie almost destroyed Fox's finances and her reputation. But Elizabeth Taylor came out of it not as a victim, but as the model for the contemporary superstar, treated like royalty and compensated like a tycoon. And, even in loss, unforgettable. She would go on to win more Oscars, make headlines in more controversies, and outlive almost all of the critics who thought Cleopatra would be her downfall. The seemingly careless gamble proved to be evidence of her survival instinct. Elizabeth Taylor was aware of the impending fire. Still, she stepped into it. We continue to tell her tale now, 60 years later, for that reason. Make sure to subscribe if you liked this glimpse into the untold stories behind Hollywood's most notorious epic. There will soon be more untold tales of famous stars and the dangers that characterize them. You won't want to miss the next one, I promise.